Welcome to You, Me, and All Things She. Our podcast is about all aspects of being a woman, from motherhood to careers, romantic relationships to family relationships and dynamics, and everything in between. It's a chance to learn, explore, and feel what's genuine and imagined as a woman in this world, along with multi-generational conversations that will stimulate your soul. So sit back, laugh, smile, and even cry a little along with us as we begin our journey together. You, me, and all things she. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of You, Me, and All Things She. Deb here, and today we've got a very special guest, as I mentioned. I have asked Nicole to be here with me, and what we're going to talk about in today's episode is the art of self advocacy, but even more important than that is how to be confident and assertive in that. So as you know, we've got to start with some definitions, make sure everybody's on the same page. So self-advocacy, what is that really? It is to, by Webster's definition, is to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, or assert his or herself, and we'll just call her herself, or our own interest, desires, and needs and rights. That's kind of a big order for us as women, would you think?
Yeah, I would think so.
But I'm ready to tackle it and see what we can uncover, because as you know, with anything self-advocacy, well, there are reasons why we don't self-advocate. And so we're going to talk about several different reasons why. And I think number one is that we just struggle occasionally, whether you struggle occasionally or it's something that you battle ongoing. Self-advocacy for us as women sometimes just as a challenge. And when we kind of put our pulse on it and finger on it, I go, okay, so why is that happening? And then we can go, okay, well, let's figure it out and find out a little bit more about why we're either not self-advocating or we are, maybe in a very strong, powerful way. And that's causing those relationships to be a little bit of a challenge or struggle. So we're going to dive in. And first of all, I think one of the things that I have personally experienced is gender stereotypes. And in this ever-changing world of all of the different dynamics of he, she, me, we, all those different things, one thing that probably I think your generation may never really experience quite like I did is this idea of women and men not being equal or even close to equal. So, sometimes that their expectation is that we're passive. I can probably think in my career, if I'm thinking professionally, there's probably been 2 or 3 real serious situations that I was like, I could have really taken offense to it, but there were comments about I should be in the back of the room helping, or I should be the one that is out there cleaning, not necessarily the one that's speaking and teaching. Right. But the one I wanted to share today that I think really brings it home is we were managing in a community. And so one of the residents, just in very casual conversation, looked, your dad and I have worked together for years. And as you know, and so he had been in that role prior to me joining him. And so
the other guy.
My husband, he had been managing, and then I joined him a few years into that mix. And so at that point, I was really kind of the focus point of the management team. But this one resident mentioned to me and called me his Girl Friday. Now, I know that many of you listening to this podcast may not really understand what a Girl Friday is.
I wouldn't.
I can understand. And although I had an idea of what it meant in theory, I really had to dig in a little bit deeper. And when I think about it, it really was first used in 1928. So that tells you kind of the gender and age of that culture that used that term.
Right.
So it was an older gentleman. And I don't think that he meant it in a derogatory way. So for me to be really self-advocating in that situation, which is maybe a little bit of a different twist and turn, is I had to not take it personally and realize that there were just that gender separation, and it wasn't really even gender related. It was more generational separations that take place. And I know that those are things that most of us are dealing with today, because generationally there are things that are so significantly different between you and my generation. And that was one that I experienced with an older generation, as being the Girl Friday. So I just wanted to share that, because I was just like, darn, I could have really, really gotten upset and been out of shape and been mad at that resident and got, how dare you call me, and just really take a personal offense. But It wouldn't have hurt him because he was doing it innocently.
Right.
I would have been the one that would have gotten all bent out of shape and, ruffled my feathers and all sorts of stuff. So to self-advocate, I was just kind of like, let it go. It's not that big of a deal. It wasn't really intended to be harmful or hurting to me in any way.
In that situation. But sometimes it can be.
That's true.
I
agree. And one that comes to mind, it was pretty and nasty. It was more of a situation where it was, you should be like cleaning the tables.
Yeah.
Not speaking in front of us, teaching me how to sell. And I was like, okay, there's a little bit of a different situation, but.
Yeah. And I remember like in high school, even like, not that the guys really had any idea because we were in high school, right? They're like, oh, get in the kitchen, make a sandwich. It's like,
yeah,
you don't know what you're talking about. You're in high school, right? Like, you're the one that's going to be making me a sandwich one day, right? So people just have no idea, I think, about the self-advocacy. Like, not really that necessarily, but like you're saying, the generational roles or the domestic roles type of thing.
Right.
That plays a lot into it, but they aren't as prominent, I think, today as they used to be.
Sure.
So like that guy that was saying that to you was in that generational perspective where the people that ever said something like that to me didn't actually mean it in that regard because things had changed from that generation
correct
to my generation now. So I never really quite experienced it in that manner. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To be able to speak to that.
Yeah. But I know even one probably that you may deal with, which not so much, but even in my generation would have been, that the man is the breadwinner and the woman's at home being this domesticated cook.
Which I'm not.
Okay. And, the one that cleans the house and all those things. And so the women had all the inside duties and the man had the outside duties. And so, to advocate for yourself might be in that relationship, especially nowadays, is that, you're not out there. I've got someone that mows the grass, so you don't have to do that.
Yep.
So therefore, to self-advocate, we need to work together in this homestead to make it neat, clean, and organized, and all those other sorts of things that we may deal with for sure.
Yeah, and not even, I think, necessarily that. Like, I'm not really a stay-at-home mom because I work.
Right.
But I work part-time. So I am like part-time, full-time stay-at-home mom, part-time worker. But Brian is the breadwinner, and so I respect that, and I have great gratitude to him for providing me the opportunity to stay home with my kids. But I am the cleaner. I am the organizer. And so when we were talking about, what should our topic be? I was thinking one day about a situation that happened with him and I, and how I had to advocate for my own happiness in our marriage, right? Because if we don't do that, then he won't know what I need out of him and out of our marriage to be a happy wife or just happy in general. So, I had just deep cleaned our closet, our pantry.
Oh, no.
You can now see our pantry floor, and it's like so satisfying. And the next day I go into the cupboard and there's a box out of place.
Uh-oh. Watch out, world.
Right? So it seems so minor, but after working so hard, you think like,
sure.
Dang, I did all that work for what, right? And so I texted him a picture of it, and I said, hey, next time, please put it back where it goes. And naturally, it was blamed on our son. So he said he'll have a conversation with them about that. But I chose to take it upon myself to speak up in such a minor thing and say, hey, this is what would help me. This is what would make me happy. Because if I never did that, then he would never be able to step up in that role to provide those things to me.
Sure.
So I think in a marriage or any relationship, you have to set the standards of what is acceptable to you and what is okay, because then someone else is able to respect that and follow those boundaries.
Sure. And as the definition talks about, it's that open communication. And so many times, especially in that situation in a married life, I know that we let those small little things, if we don't self-advocate, they get underneath your skin, and then they start to create havoc in the relationship, and all of a sudden you're resentful to the other person, and you're like, well, you didn't put the cap on the toothpaste, dang it.
Yeah.
And, now there's this big, huge situation to uncover because I just didn't self-advocate going, it really pissed me off, honestly.
Yeah.
You didn't put the cap on the toothpaste
and
it made a big mess. Or, the box of cereal, I couldn't find it, or I couldn't find it for, one of the kids. And so, I just spent, you may not realize I spent, 6 hours today cleaning this pantry, and it's something that I took great pride in doing. And so, just that communication alone is such a big part of that self-advocacy. And the next one I want to talk about is kind of this concept and idea of fear of retaliation. A good part of my career, honestly, has been in a male-dominated industries and professions, and one of them being the motorcycle training, which I was excited I got to do that yesterday and today. And so what I tend to find I need to do to self-advocate in that situation, because I teach with men. I teach mostly men. And so, one guy even came up today. It's funny, this class talking about this.
Right.
He said, so are you the lady that's going to take care of this afterwards? And I kind of looked at him and I go, well, tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking of. And so he had an urgent need that he needed that filed with the state immediately because of some other situations. And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm going to be one of your rider coaches along with the other person. I said, but we'll make sure that we pass that on to the person that's going to take care of that for you. So there was instantly that judgment because I was a female.
Right. That your role was something.
That my role was something administrative, not necessarily a technical aspect. But then, what was a little rewarding in that self-advocacy is at the end of the class, and he was an experienced rider, he came up and I learned so much from your class. And, it wasn't just to me, it was to the other coach too. But that's to me the gratification of when you do self-advocate, and it comes back to be rewarding because we had the courage to stand up, to say, I deserve better than that, but whatever you're giving me. And so I'm just going to, in a nice, loving, kind way, human to human, say, no, that's not really the way it is.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be confrontational. It can just be matter of fact that, and I think we live in a world today where there has been enough women or enough people to speak up, not necessarily for our rights, but for our equality, to where we do live in a very different generation, even maybe yours or, your mom's generation, where the duty was, you stay home, I'll go work, I'll see you soon, where now there are stay-home dads, and stuff like that too. So we do have the opportunity where the generations are different, but I think because we are sometimes, not always, seen as a weaker
gender,
or a more timid gender, where we just supposed to go with the flow. We're supposed to just, possibly be submissive. And I don't want to say that matter-of-factly because not everybody is that way. Not every marriage or relationship is that way. But I think we are still in a process of transforming from that culture of back then to maybe a new culture of what is different than that, if that makes sense. Kind
of that mutual respect no matter what you come from.
Just
who you are and what you provide.
I think us standing up for ourselves is different these days than it maybe used to be, and it's more acceptable these days than it used to.
Sure.
And so a lot of times I think, like you were saying earlier, why maybe don't we? Well, maybe the generation prior didn't teach us.
Correct.
And so when we were talking about what topic we would do, I was like, well, I do highly believe in self-advocacy. I have a daughter, I have a stepdaughter, and even my son. I think it's important to teach, this is how, if somebody does you wrong, you don't put them in their place, but you stick up for yourself.
Right.
My son's almost 4. So if somebody's going to hit you, you need to go tell the teacher. Don't be a tattletale, but stick up for yourself.
Sure.
And the same thing, I think even more importantly, I had to go through a lot of different perspectives with a girl because girls have to be raised very differently in the world today, right? And so we have to be able to be strong and comfortable and know our boundaries and our morals to be able to be like, hey, don't do that. That's wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so to teach my daughter that is going to be a very highly important thing to me that I'll put forward, because I want her to be able to stick up to someone knowing that what she did was right, because maybe based on her morals, her beliefs, or that just overall society, what that person did was wrong. I want her to be the person to speak up.
Sure.
And be that voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if we don't, sometimes that does lead to that topic that we've talked about in many of the other previous episodes, is lack of self-confidence. Right. And then that just creates that vicious cycle of, well, I didn't stand up for myself, so I must not be worthy. And so if I'm not worthy, then I can't speak up to myself again. speak up for myself again in the next situation because I'm not worthy. So it's that vicious cycle of confidence that, we as women sometimes are battling.
And I think something that can go along with that too is I had a friend come to me one day and she was like, hey, I just got to talk to you. And I'm not going to go into details, right? It's personal, but she told me all about this situation with her and another friend, and she gave wrong advice to that person. And she felt convicted. And so she was like, I don't know what to do, saying this to me because I know what I did and what I said was wrong, but I'm now conflicted with my own beliefs, right? Because I don't believe in what I said to her.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, well, reflect into yourself and think about really, if you don't believe in that, why you might have felt provoked to give that advice.
Sure.
But you can always go back and take it back.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I said, you can always go back to your friend and be like, hey, I made a mistake. You know what I mean? And that's, I don't know necessarily self-advocacy in technical terms, but it's self-conviction and self-confidence enough to call yourself out.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And
I think it's the highest level of self-advocacy, because if she had just said it and it went on her way and it wasn't stirring in her soul as some internal conflict, and then she didn't speak up and say something, I think that would be a whole nother story. But the fact that she did was really truly self-advocating, because she was like, hey, I messed up. I was wrong in giving you that information. And as I've thought about it, it really doesn't sit well with my soul. Yeah. So, I think that's like the highest level of self-advocacy. And
self-respect, you know what I mean?
Right.
You respect yourself and your thoughts, morals, everything enough.
And that relationship.
Right.
So bringing that all together is just like, oh my goodness. So sometimes what we'll do is in our minds, we'll kind of go back to those past experiences. If we've had a situation where, another thing when we were talking about the generations, is that self-advocating in some environments would be a sign of disrespect, when in true honesty, it's not that I'm being disrespectful, but that I have my own opinions and my own views and my own belief systems, as you mentioned, and I feel convicted enough to stand up and say that, and say, I don't agree. What picture you're painting in your mind is very different than what's in my mind. And so let's talk about it, or I'm going to give you my thoughts and ideas, and we can just part ways as having different opinions of the same situation, if you will. And
I think you can that's funny, I just thought of this. I actually know a very specific situation, but I'm not going to give all that information.
Okay.
But say I was dating somebody in high school. You're going to know exactly the story I'm talking about. But so I was dating somebody in high school. I wanted to break up, but quite hadn't gotten the reasoning that I could, give, right? And so a situation came along where that individual was going to do something that I explicitly said, I'm not comfortable with you doing that. If you do that, I will break up with you because it's not what I believe in.
Okay.
So went and did it, young kids, whatever. And low key, I was like, yes, right? But so anyways, he went and did it. And I said, hey, okay, I warned you. That's not what I believe in. That's not my standards. This isn't going to work out. And I remember Dad came to me, and I'll never forget it because it's one of those like pat on the backs, right? And so it's been a monumental thing all these years later that I look back on, and I'm like, okay, so speaking up for myself does it. So anyways, Dad came up to me, he said, you did the right thing. I mean, he probably didn't like the guy, but he said, you stuck up for yourself and what you believe in, so good for you. And that stuck with me every time that I got into a position where I was like, I don't believe in that. I'm not happy with this. You know what I mean? Or whenever situation I needed to be in. And so even encouraging somebody else to be like, it's okay to speak up for yourself, or, and so I hope that makes sense. But yeah, it was just a funny situation where I did it and he wasn't involved, right? Dad wasn't involved in the breakup.
Right.
But then afterwards, when I was like, yo, we broke up, then it was like hey, I'm proud of you for doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, sometimes we need to be that inspiration to those around us to say, first of all, I'm here.
Right.
If you need someone to speak to, you need to talk to, you need to whatever. And then in that situation, we need to be their cheerleader when they're struggling with that too, to say, I understand completely. I've been there. And maybe it's time that you do stand up, or, that you did. Congratulations. Feel confident in that. And so just encouraging them to be in that space of self-advocacy. And it's okay to do that, because then again, we'll get to that. I'm beating myself up and now I'm not worthy. And now my self-confidence is all shaken to bits and pieces. And then, so where do we go from there? It's like, so maybe next time I do speak up and self-advocate, or we go back to those past experiences. Well, it didn't work out too well this time. So maybe I'm just not going to say anything. And then I'm going to, jeopardize myself in the mix rather than standing up and self-advocating.
And I know just based on human nature that we've all been there. And I don't know if I'm sure everybody's been there, right? But I think it weighs on women differently because we are subliminally, you know what I'm saying? Like told to shh, shh, shh.
Yeah.
But we've all been in the situation where something happens, we don't speak up, and we go home and we're like, that made me mad. And you're like, you know what? I should have said something.
Right.
Right. So we've all been there, and that's that moment where you're like self-advocacy.
Yes.
That's what they're talking about. And so you look at that situation where you didn't speak up, and you either wait for an opportunity to, right, for the next time if it presents itself, or you don't, and you learn from it. And next time you feel that urge in you when something happens, then you advocate.
Absolutely. That sixth sense that, I think we have as women, we do have a much more, and majority, I'm not going to stereotype everyone, but as far as women, we kind of have that sixth sense, that pit of our gut that says, do this or don't do this. And, the more we can learn to listen to that quiet, still voice that speaks to us probably louder than we give it credit,
right.
Just kind of go for it. And then especially when it's the self-advocacy part of it, just find a way to lovingly, kindly. And that's what I'm trying to learn as I get more mature in this life, because I can be direct, I can be bold, I can be straightforward. I don't want to play games. It's not what it's about, but I can also be a little bit kinder and gentler in my presentation and not be so harsh with that. So I'm just learning some of that.
And I think some of it, like what it comes from is knowing your worth too, right? Is, so it goes along with the confidence, but it's when we don't feel worthy, we don't feel like we can talk up, like speak up, right? So if you're in a domestic situation where it's not healthy, I'm not going to say anything because I'm nothing, right? He tells me I'm nothing, so I'm nothing. Or, at work, well, there's somebody else in the same position as me that's a male and maybe a little bit louder. I'm obviously not as good as him, so I just won't say anything. Or her, or whoever it is, right? Because I think I said the last time I was on, the biggest competition with women is women.
Yes.
It is the ugliest thing out there, and I just can't comprehend it. But we attack each other more than sometimes men do. And so we're not just talking about the dynamic of a man-woman relationship, which I think is probably the most common because men are typically superior in the work environment, typically in the hierarchy of the home, head of the home, right? So there's still that kind of societal thing, but then we have the same thing where women attack women. So you have to advocate against yourself, against women too.
Absolutely true. And we said we're gonna have that as a topic for sure, because women, I was listening to something earlier today, and there was thousands and thousands and thousands of women on this presentation, and it was just amazing to watch those women, rather than wanting to poke each other's eyes out and punch you in the gut and, how dare you? It was just so nice to see all these women going, I hear where you're coming from. And that was really the whole purpose of us starting this podcast. And I love that we can do that together. And as I mentioned, multi-generational, because it is so different among the generations that it's great that we can talk about all of those. So most importantly, we've talked about all the things that cause us to not self-advocate, but what can we do if we're in that place and we need to? I wanted to be sure that we can talk about that. And really what that seminar I was attending earlier today was all about. That was about finding a mentor or a role model or someone that you can really reach out to help guide you. There are times when we feel like we're all alone and no one understands what we're going through. And then we go to this seminar that's got 12,000 women together, and all I'm seeing in the chat is that I understand, I feel your pain, I know what you're talking about, on and on and on. And it's like, okay, so I'm not alone.
Right.
I'm not the only one that feels isolated. And so we just need to reach out to one another and share the stories so that we can help each other heal and grow and become more than what we were as an individual, for sure.
Support group, something.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. So we can also challenge those negative thoughts and beliefs. And you were talking about that earlier, is that, we kind of just sometimes think that that's the norm based on our situation or our work environment or our family environment, that, I'm just meant to not say anything or be the one that doesn't self-advocate. And especially I think once we as women start a family, we tend to self-advocate less, because we've got so many juggling balls in the air that we, in that process of losing who we are, we lose our voice to speak up for what we believe. What are your thoughts?
No, I disagree.
You disagree? Okay.
Yeah, I disagree just because, so when I was younger, I was confrontational, right? I was pretty bullheaded. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, as I matured and I realized you get more with honey, right, than vinegar. Yeah. I refined that quite a bit. And I never let go of sticking up for myself. It was something I've always taught my sister, right? In middle school, like, oh, you're not going to trash talk her. You got to come through me, right? Like, I've always been that, like, bigger, I don't know how to say it.
Bolder in your face kind of personality. Yeah, that's who you are.
And so that hasn't changed since having kids. Instead, I channel it into my kids. Oh. But I also channel it, like I said earlier, into my marriage, because as they grow up to see me and my husband's relationship, what are they going to learn?
Right.
So maybe I don't say, hey, let me go get my toenails painted as often as I should, for self-care.
Self-love,
but advocacy, I think, hasn't changed. And that could just be our dynamic of the relationship where I feel comfortable to do so. Yeah. But I have to be at my peak to be able to care for the kids.
Sure.
At the best I can. So I think that's where that line differs for me.
So, and you say, in order to do that, I have to self-advocate. Mm-hmm. So where most of us would, again, depending upon our past experiences, we may shove that down. Yeah. And then all of a sudden.
Personality-wise, too, it just may not be your cup of tea to be like, yo, get it together. But it is, and it's, again, how our dynamic works. So
yeah, absolutely. So that's awesome. So yeah, the generational differences, and again, how you were raised versus how I was raised was so different.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That, you probably saw a little bit of a strong role model to be such a strong woman, and you saw the dynamic that we shared, and now you're taking those pieces that you love onto your family that you think would really be helpful. Yeah. So it is just kind of that growing process, which is interesting to kind of talk about. So how could you build your confidence? Well, it might be speaking up more regularly. As I think I mentioned in a previous, and it might be saying no. I was talking to someone today, even in my class, and he was older than me, retired guy, and he was like, oh, I've always had problems with that. And I said, but that's in the past. Mm-hmm. Leave that in the past. Right. And all you have is this very moment. And then he goes, you're absolutely right. We did a little fist bump. And then he took off, did it perfectly. Nice. And so I said, see, all you have is this moment. Mm-hmm. So living in the moment, building that confidence, not looking about the rear view mirror and figuring out what I did wrong and how I'm not going to do that again, kind of a thing. So all of those things begin to build our self-confidence, which then gives us the opportunity to feel empowered to speak up, to self-advocate, to say what we need to say in order to keep that communication and relationship strong.
I think practicing it too. Good. You can start out small, and then, what that does is it's like, okay, I have a voice. Mm-hmm. I have something to say that's of value. I have an opinion, right? I'm my own person. Sure. And so you can start out small, and it's just like exercising. You're not going to feel like a sexy mama on your first workout, right?
True. Yeah,
you're going to have to take some time to see that improvement and see those changes before you can be like, hey girl, I like to see you in a bikini. You know what I mean? So you can start slow and advocate on whether it's self-care you need more of. Hey, watch the kids. I'm going to go get my toes done. Hey, put that thing back in the pantry. Wherever your line starts for you, find that and try to put it in place.
Absolutely. So begin, take action.
The rest is easy.
Today. Yeah, you'll just start and it'll grow from there. So as you get more confident, you can also start challenging those conversations, as what Nicole was saying, but doing it, finding a way to do it in a loving way. It's not like you have to be the big bitch. And I'm going to use that word kind of openly. You don't have to be nasty about it. It's a matter of, and if you're going to be coming off that way, maybe now is not the right time to say it. Find a way to say it in a better way so that you can say it from a kinder, more gentle way of, this just really bummed me out, or it made me, I was really upset when I saw that happen.
And what you can do is channel it into the self-love, right? So it's hard to explain, right? So something happens to us, we initially get mad.
Yep.
How can we take our time to stop and breathe and then be like, hey, I love myself enough to say something.
Good point.
And so you take that anger and you channel it into, I'm only saying something because I love myself enough. And that's how it can possibly change the presentation when you give it to somebody.
Sure.
Or I love you enough in our relationship to say something. Hey, I like being married to you. To make our marriage better, here's how you can help it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And this is what I'm willing to do.
Right.
You know, and maybe I haven't always spoken up, but I'm willing to just open and be vulnerable with you and be true in order to really, because I value, me, first of all.
Yeah. Nobody in this world is going to make us happy except for ourselves.
Yes.
So when we put ourselves first, we're able to make ourselves happy and ensure our happiness because we only have one life of it. But we're also able to make sure everybody else is happy because we are.
Right. Good point. Very good point. So to wrap it up, there are always an option for us to support one another. And so, as I mentioned, I have opened up a few coaching spots for my clients. If there's somebody that you need to talk to, first of all, if you're going to begin to self-advocate based on this podcast, put it in the comments below. Let us know. Put it in the group chat in the Facebook group.
If you have tips that work for you.
Absolutely. We would all love to enjoy those ways. Little bit different maybe than what we're used to doing, but we certainly want to be able to bring it together, self-advocate as women in all of our relationships, whether it's professional work, personal business, family, whatever the case may be. And so just simply let us know. We love to chat. We love to talk. We love to encourage. And so please let us know. But I want you to stay tuned for next week's show because I don't have the details yet, but we're going to talk about relationships. It just has led us to that point where we need to talk about them. I'm not quite sure which ones, which types, and how to communicate or what we're going to talk about. I know all of them. Yeah, that could be like a whole 10-week series.
Yeah, right.
But I thank you for joining us on this episode. Thank you, Nicole, for joining me. It was wonderful to have you. And thank you for the topic of self-advocacy. So today's episode, The Art of Self Advocacy, and how to be confident and assertive. And once again, be sure to share, like, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We have so much more to talk about, and I can't wait to hear from you. And until next time, see you soon.